Hi, I'm Dan DiDio, and you're listening to the Never Gets Old podcast with Mac Jackson.
I'm Duncan MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod.
My name is Ichabod Crane.
Name's MacGyver. Colonel Jack O'Neill, SG-1.
I am Batman!
Hello, I'm the Doctor.
So there's this man, he has a time machine. Up and down history he goes, zip, 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 getting into scrapes.
For years, and maybe more than that, right, Mac? But how long has it been? Has it been 6, 7 years ago?
Are you telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
Hey, now wait a minute. Now wait just a minute.
Human beings were not meant to sit in little cubicles staring at computer screens all day.
I've got something for you.
Oh, merci, Sonor. Just one more thing, sir.
Oh boy.
Just like that. Bing, bang, boom.
At this point, I'd settle for the boom.
They'd love it here, don't you think?
This is what I'm saying.
And by the way, where is your podcast? Tell everybody that's here.
Welcome to the Never Gets Old podcast. The podcast of all we love in TV, movies, music, and comics. With your hosts, Mac Jackson and Nathan Shell. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Facebook, and YouTube. Donations at paypal.com at macwjackson@comcast.net.
Listen to my taping songs. DJ saying that they're too long. His guitar may be silenced, but his soul goes on and on. Alone again, alone again. His stories were like us, a beginning and an end. Alone again. Now I listen in my room.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Never Gets Old podcast. I'm your host, Mac Jackson, and I get to chat with Dan DiDio today, who, after a day of missing out a very nice shirt that I had planned to wear yesterday.
That's a shame. I was hoping you'd wear it 2 days in a row, but if you got all sweaty, I get it. I understand it completely.
I sent the picture. I'm like, well, because when you're getting ready in the day, like, wait, am I talking with anybody that yes, I'm going to be on film. I better wear something snazzy.
I know that feeling. Most of the time, I have t-shirts on. So you got a collared shirt today. You should be.
Well, that's the thing too. I have like drawers. I'm sure you do too. Of superhero t-shirts, and and if it were my choice, I'd wear them all the time. But my day job, they want something with the collar.
Yeah.
I
think I have a full drawer of Godzilla shirts, which is really weird when you think about it.
Are you big into Godzilla?
What? Excuse me?
Is that one of your?
Oh, it's been one of my things for a while. I got a lot of things to keep me busy. But Godzilla was always one of them. That's something I always enjoy. I don't know why, but it's a lot of fun.
Oh no, I'm with you. There's certain things that are my thing. There are a lot of things in the world, like I'll say, well, maybe I don't know. I don't know the whole story, but there's a couple things in this world. Pardon me. Couple things in this world that I'm ready to fight to the death on.
Yeah, they always tell you what's that golden age, and you always hear like somewhere around 11 to 12 years old, and there are certain things that just made its impression on you when you were that age that stick with you for the rest of your life, and some people can't get past that. I like to refer to it, I like to have it around me, but I realize it's still just a moment in time that should exist as itself, and other things should move on.
Sure, but there's things that are part of your DNA. Like for me, coincidentally, you'll appreciate this, Batman. Batman was my first superhero, and it stayed with me. Like if you had to pick your 4 cornerstones of things that if somebody thinks of you, they connect with, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was always one of them.
Yeah, like I said, I could go back to the Adam West show and to the Spider-Man cartoon on Saturday mornings. Probably is the first 2 exposures I had to superheroes, and Batman was big at the time, and I had all the stuff, but it's weird because that version of Batman, it was easy to age out of that in a weird way.
Sure.
You know, and so as I got older, you know, Spider-Man stuck with me a lot more than Batman did, so to speak. And it's always interesting to see people coming into Batman now. But I mean, you know, you look at those key points of, you know, Dark Knight Returns in comics and the Michael Keaton Batman movie, and I think that is where the real Batman resurgence comes back in, where Batman becomes cool for a whole new generation, and hasn't left since then. You know, and then you get the Bruce Timm, Paul Dini Batman cartoon, and then pretty much you're really imposing and, you know, putting your will on an entire generation of kids that still carries to this day. You know?
Yeah. Well, when I was a kid, I had Super Friends, and of course the Adam West. That was the only Batman other than comics.
Yeah.
And you know, it's funny because I think about it, and you know, Batman, I think of a certain way now.
Yeah.
You know, he's got his laws. He's not a happy-go-lucky guy. But then I go back and I watch Super Friends, and I go, what was it about him as a kid that clicked for me? Because he's not what Batman is to me today.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But there's something that's just I don't know. I could never go, oh, I know exactly what it was. Out of all the superheroes, I'm like, there's something about the fact that he's human and he's still standing among, you know, gods.
You know, Batman is that great character that, as I would say, he could be prowling the alleys of Gotham City. He could be standing on the moon next to Superman and still feel like it's the same character in both places, even though it seems wildly, they seem wildly opposed to each other. I mean, not a lot of characters have that flexibility. You know, Superman could stand on that moon, but he can't control that alley. It looks a little ridiculous. That's what's fun about Batman. That's why you get away with it. But from you know, I watched the Super Friends cartoons. I got more excited by all the characters you don't see often, like Green Lantern or the Atom, and all. When they used to do those little one-offs for those characters, that felt more special to me because realistically, you got to go back to this. You know, I'm looking at the '60s now, '60s, early '70s. You were inundated with Superman and Batman. There was a lot of Superman and Batman everywhere, just in regards to merchandise and memorabilia, because people knew who they were from television shows and, you know, and things of that nature. But all those other characters you never saw anything about. And I found those characters to be mysteries. So I was more intrigued by seeing the characters that I didn't know about, that I wasn't overexposed to. And that's why, for me, Batman and Superman were just a lot more commonplace. And I got more attracted to the things on the corners of the comic book world and the superhero world because they weren't as readily available, and therefore they seemed more special.
Well, yeah. And, you know, first of all, let me just back up a little. I'm so excited to talk to you because
we just got into it, didn't we? It happened.
I've always liked and appreciated you because you're like the perfect comic book guy to talk to, not because of your position, but because you get it and you're excited.
Yeah.
And, you know, you wouldn't remember, but I met you at Comic-Con right before, at the New York City Comic-Con.
Oh, New York, okay.
Yeah, New York before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I you know, we were looking at the list of what are we going to do today. And I'm like, well, I want to see Dan because he's fun. I don't know what he's doing, but I want to go to it. And, you know, you started off with, all right, everybody, what was your first comic?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, see, I could sit here and just go on with that.
Well, that allowed me to really position the conversation. And I used to say that, especially on Sunday shows, I used to do a Sunday panel. I used to call, you know, and it was really about, it was called For the Love of Comics, because I figured anybody who's sitting in a panel at 11 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday after a 4-day show, they must love comics because there's no other reason to be here. So therefore we have that connection already because I would be there too. And it used to turn into just a conversation about how did you first get your first comic book? What are the things you like the most? What are you looking at for stories? What are this? And I used to ask questions all the time. And my favorite question and my favorite story from that panel, I used to ask the question, what's the craziest place you ever bought a comic? And people used to tell me hysterical stories. Used to be comic book vending machines. Used to be buy them in the back of a church. But one guy stands up and he tells me a story. And he tells me that he was in Iraq. He was in Iraq at a PX. and he had the first part of a Batman story or somebody's story in the one PX, and he didn't have the second part of the story. And he called around to other PXs in other bases around Iraq in the middle of a war, and found the other comic. So he put together a convoy of Hummers to drive from one hotspot to another in order to get that second part of the comic book story.
Wow.
And he told me that the entire place was silent, and I just said, I will never ask this question again. There will never be a better answer than that. And but when you have that level of appreciation and love, how can you not feed off of that? How can you not get excited by that?
Exactly.
I mean, that's the truth,
And it's baffling to me that, okay, I know I'm not the only one, and it sounds silly, but it always baffles me when I go, how are you not reading the comic? I understand, you think you're a movie expert and you know superheroes because you've seen movies or whatever. Why, for the love of God, would you not dive into the back catalog or even current stuff, but the back catalog, which is a sure thing? Why would you not do that? You know what I mean?
Oh, I agree completely. Look, I have two great loves, and it's comics and animation and cartoons. Comics and cartoons. I think you still can call it cartoons, can't you? We're not that. We haven't elevated the craft that much, have we? But I loved cartoons, and I was very lucky. Spend my first half of my career working in television, and then getting into animation and getting a chance to work on cartoons, which was something fun and exciting, and getting to meet people in that business. I got to meet Joe Ruby and Joe Barbera and Lou Scheinman. Was it Lou Scheinman? I forgot Lou.
Anyway, I know who you mean, though.
Yeah. Anyway, so I met a bunch of Phil Roman and all these Phil Roman and all these guys. I used to meet all these guys, which were my idols because they made cartoons, and I love that. And when I had to create stuff, I went to the comic book people to get to create it. I was developing Metalman as an animated series at ABC with Jeanette Kahn, and we had Louise Simonson doing the script Bible on that, and that was fabulous. And then I was doing Thunder Agents as an animated series with Marv Wolfman, and Marv brought in Tom Crummett to do designs, and that was exciting. But at least we spent less time talking about what the character's about because we already knew, so you could really spend the time talking about what the show is going to be about, which made more sense. So you should go to source, but there's a lot of people out there, especially in the entertainment community, that they don't appreciate what the sensibilities are, and they feel the need to change it just for the sake of changing it, without understanding what they're changing. You got to understand the core conceits about what a character is, what it does. You got to understand what the core interest of the fan is. You can't keep it exactly the same because it's very hard to move mediums without making some level of change.
Sure.
Just because the way the story is being told differently, so you're going to have to make some adaptations to make it work better in the different mediums. But you should understand what the core idea is, at least, and what makes this character interesting, exciting. And if you need to change things, you change everything but that. That's
right. Right. Well, the New 52 was great for that because, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were basically trying to refocus all these great characters, Metal Men included, to say, here's what they are at their core, very much like what Marvel did with the movies. The reason the movies work is because they took out a whole lot of crap and said, this is why Captain America is special. This is what makes Thor cool. And New 52, I loved because besides the obvious, this is bold and this is exciting. But, here's Jeff Johns on Aquaman, and Aquaman is not an easy character to write.
That's probably one of the characters I used to define New 52, because Jeff and I completely disagreed on the approach at the start. Really, and he had such a clear vision of what Aquaman was. He got it. You know what I mean? And he probably gets the DC characters probably more than anybody else, to be honest with you. He understands how they work and think. He's just a pure
purist,
comic
really.
book writer for DC that works so well. He's just amazing at his job. And one of the things that I found interesting was that he had a real take on Aquaman that I didn't fully get, and I disagreed with, but he was so sure about it, and based on all of our past relationship and work, that you gotta roll with the dice and see how it goes from there. And he nailed it, and I love what he did with that, because he really did get down to the core of who Aquaman was, turned a weakness into a strength,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And ultimately, the character just took off from there and became something completely different that I think and never really existed in that space beforehand. So it's kind of super exciting to see, you know. And I think that's great. I think that's what you got to do. And we do 52. We did that. You know, people get lost in the minutia. They sit there and argue about Superman's pants, you know, the outer shorts.
Yeah.
And the argument is, but if you're building a character today, right? If you're making a character today for brand new, would you use that design? And the question, the answer is no. There's not a single new character is created with that design.
Right.
So why, if we're creating somebody new, would we go back to a design? You know, I always used to argue, or used to roll. I shouldn't admit this, but I do. I used to roll my eyes every time somebody gave me an homage cover of Action Comics #1, and I'm looking at the cover, and there's a 1937 DeSoto. Somebody's lifting. I'm like, first of all, if somebody had a 1937 DeSoto right now, it's going to be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Why would you have somebody throw that around?
Right.
You know? So I mean, but the idea is we get so lost in the nostalgia that we lose sight of what the character is supposed to do and say to connect with the audience for today. And that's what New 52 is about. It's removing the nostalgia, but keeping the core essence of the character so that more people found these characters accessible. And,
well,
you know,
and Grant on Action Comics, that was so wonderful and well paced, like him in a t-shirt and moving into a new apartment and the landlady and, you know, all of that. You're like, the pacing of a lot of New 52 was fresh and wonderful.
That was one of my favorites. And you got to remember the effect that Smallville had. I mean, Smallville ran for 10 years, 9 years, 10 years. And, you know, Superman never was in costume. You know, never wore a costume. And yet he got a chance. Everybody knew he was Superman. Clark Kent was Superman. And Grant brought a brashness to him that I think would probably exist in a character that had those powers and abilities. If life comes that easy, you just take it a lot less seriously. That's something of the nature, and that's part of the maturation of the character and the you know, the journey that character goes on. And you want to explain it. You got to remember, we're in a periodical business. We got to put out books every month. So we have to find a way to continually tell stories. And the only way you can do that is to really dive in and explore things and take your time to explore aspects of it. You know, if you look at earlier comics, comic books used to be where it was a big action beat and action happened every issue and action was resolved, right? And then there was a slow burn on the personal life that played out endlessly throughout the years.
Yeah.
Now comics, they flip the paradigm. The action beat moves slow, it moves methodically, it never really takes over the direction or focus of the story. And we spend all our energy exploring the personal characters and all that. The problem is that once you start exploring those personal issues, unless you resolve them, they get tedious, and it almost seems like the characters are unlikable in some ways, you know. So, and then if you do resolve them, then you're going to constantly keep on resolving things, and you're moving their personal life faster than the action story. The personal life should drag itself out. The action story should really carry the book. But right now, you're losing a lot of those beats in the books the stories are being told at the moment, you know.
Well, it's funny. I always, you know, besides loving you as a person, I've always appreciated. People go, oh yeah, well he's got to have it all because he's the editor and he's, you know, in charge of stuff. And meanwhile, I've always thought, are you nuts? Just the meetings alone, I'm sure he has to go to, and you know,
all day long.
Right? And the fact that you can like be energetic about it and go into work every day and know that you have to go, okay, listen, wait a minute. The minutia, we have to get these pages done. This book has to get out, without even enjoying, you know, the miracle that is comics. I thought, I don't think enough people understand the crap that you would go through.
I mean, listen, I really was, I was very hands-on. I'll be honest, I was very hands-on at the beginning when I first started at DC. Probably through 2007, I was pretty hands-on through the end of the 52 weekly series. Then we pretty much went hands-off for a while, and then I moved positions, and it becomes a different job. So the way I'm always involved in everything is I'm involved in the onset, the initial proposal, the initial idea. We work through what we'd like the book to be, what we'd like the story to say. We want the character, talk about how the character's at, and put down some parameters about do's and don'ts of what you go on. But after that, the book was gone. Then I used to see it on my desk, and there's a rare occasion or two that I actually stopped the book from going out because it was so far off where I thought the book was going to be, and actually held them up and said, "We have to stop. We need to rethink this. I'd rather put this book on a shelf than put it out in the store and have something where we have to feel we need to correct in a character later down the road." So I've had those situations, but for the most part, you let a lot of stuff go, because even if it's not what you think, the truth is when you're running a line that has, you're responsible for up to sometimes more than 70 titles in a month. If you think about it, 70 titles in a month. They can't all be for you. They can't be all that you like. You know what I mean? It's not your one. It's just not what flavor. So, and I actually learned that from Paul Levis. He used to say, "I don't like it, but go ahead and do it." And that's a good logical approach to things. You're there to make sure that you're not doing something that offends or damages ultimately what's going on. But at the end of the day, you got to let the teams in charge of the books take charge of them. But if they get off message too far, then you have to pull it back in and then regroup. But for the most part, those books are running alone. I used to joke when people give me a hard time, I used to say, "Well, it's good that I only found time to work on the books you don't like and didn't touch any of the books that you did."
See, that's good.
That's a deft hand.
And one, like, I know you love Metal Men, right? I mean, that's always been, So. Yeah. When you were writing that, I for my own writing, I learned, because I'm paying attention, and I know Metal Men, not the easiest, as much as you love them, not the easiest characters to write, because especially with them, you could go too comical.
Yep.
Because they all have their own personality and jokey or serious or whatever. And you got to walk that fine line to make them interesting, but not make them caricatures.
Yeah, and characters is very easy to make them, because that's what they are. Because they're all fragmentations of very strong particular types of actions and behavior. Ultimately, it's very easy to lean into those things and play that, not even just the sense of the dialogue, but also the sight gags. And one of the first, Metal Men's an interesting thing, because Metal Men's been part of almost my career, both in animation and TV. I mean, because I got very close to getting it made as an animated series at ABC, and the only reason why it didn't get made is because Disney bought ABC and they canceled all the Warner Brothers product.
Sure,
simple as that. And then I was at Mainframe, which is a computer animated series, and I tried to get the rights again from DC, and unfortunately at that time I couldn't do it, so therefore they didn't want to give it to Mainframe, so I didn't get that. But then when I got to DC Comics, it's one of the characters I always wanted to work on, and I got a chance to work on it with the Wednesday Comics series, the newspaper series we did.
Yeah.
And that was purely by accident. Somebody dropped out of the book. They needed another page, and they offered it to me, and I said I'd do Metal Man, and we had a good time. We had a lot of fun with it, and that was a dry run for me. And I used to work with other talent trying to do Metal Man, but I had such a distinctive point of view on that I kept on rejecting pitches from people because it just wasn't. It's what you do. It's what happened. It's one of those. I'm going to say that was my one personal weak spot. And then ultimately, when I knew I was winding down at DC and I knew my days were coming to an end, I said, you know what? I'm going to do this book. So I said, if this is going to be the last thing I do at DC, it's going to be, and it was. It's the last thing I did at DC, and I had a blast.
Well, I'm glad that you did it, because I understand that passion. Like with with my own writing, I'm doing. You can see. I don't know if you can see the poster behind me. An audio series
Right.
But I got to write it and I got to edit it, and it's all me, and it's all, I got to do voices, but it's something that is so personal that I don't want anybody else. You can come in, if I can get the actors from the show to come in and do their voices, dynamite, because you're the people,
right?
But still my baby.
And that's how I felt. Even though Metal Man is not my baby, I mean, the good part is I got to create at DC some original characters, and I never had any interest in Batman and Superman. I would much prefer, and I would rather work on Bat Cow than Batman.
Okay. I'm sure there's some story there.
I don't know why. I actually did 2 short stories and an appearance of Batcow in a book I wrote. So I probably wrote more Batcow than most people. Which
you were the guy then. Okay.
I'm not really sure that's a distinction, but I'm going to go with it. Then I created a character called Sideways, which was, my look, I love Domac for New 52 because that was my Hulk, and I got a chance to do Sideways because that was my Spider-Man. Sure. And I sort of, I wrote them through. I wrote my favorite characters through proxy, and then I got to do my real favorite characters, which Metal Man straight out. Which that's a good 1, 2, 3.
Well, I loved Sideways. They're still using them too, which I'm thrilled.
You know what? I heard that, and I actually bought one DC comic in 3 years, and that was one where he appeared only because I wanted to see it.
Yeah. Dark Crisis.
As I always say, I'm really glad to see the character used. I was trying during that whole New Age of Heroes, trying to get other writers to use other characters, because these characters, once you create new characters, if you're existing in the same book, you're working with your same audience. You could even if you bring guest stars into your book, it's still the title character's audience.
Right.
But when you take that title character and move him into somebody else's book, it's almost like third-party validation that he matters because he exists outside of his own world. And for the New Age of Heroes characters that we created, for them to really work, other people needed to pick them up and use them, and never really got that sense of sharing from everyone in there, which was a shame because I thought we had a lot of fun characters to use. Sure. But then I did hear that 1 or 2 of them started to make it out, and I thought to myself, I said, it's a lot like DC in the 60s. If you go back to DC in the 60s, I get on tangents in case you haven't noticed this.
Hey, you're on the right podcast, bud.
Okay. If you go to DC in the 60s, all right, the story is that, you have the Batman TV show, and it's super successful. And if you look at all the books that DC's putting out, Batman's on the cover of everything. Doesn't matter. He's on the cover of Jerry Lewis comics. He's on the cover, and he's on the cover of every book because Batman was selling anything that he was on. Then the show collapses, and it takes the comics with it. Makes this big sucking sound.
Right.
And ultimately, what DC didn't notice was Marvel's rise at that particular period of time. Sure. Marvel all of a sudden is starting to rise, and not only that, but they were limited with the number of books they had on stands, and all of a sudden they doubled their line. All the books, Captain America and Iron Man and Tales of Suspense becomes 2 books. Tales of Astonish, everything all of a sudden, and now they got a race going on. So DC, in their infinite wisdom, decided to get young, and I'm going to use the word young with quotations around it, and compete with Marvel. And ultimately, you get, with their attempt to go young, Brother Power the Geek, Metamorpho, Plastic Man, the Creeper, Hawk and Dove, and a handful of other things that are quickly forgotten.
Right. Right.
Quickly forgotten. And those books all disappear probably. I think the longest is maybe 18 issues for Metamorpho, but a lot of books are done by 6 issues.
Wow.
By 6 issues.
Wow.
Hawk and Dove, Creeper, Secret Six is maybe 8, but they all go away really quickly. But 20, 30 years later, those characters resonated with somebody, and that somebody is now working, and that somebody is now writing, and that somebody now wants to tell the story with those characters.
Sure.
So all these characters are forgotten and considered failures are now starting to pop up and appear in comics in the late 70s and into the 80s. And all of a sudden now, Creeper is a known character. Hawk and Dove are known characters on TV shows, and all these things start to take root from failures that occurred 20 to 30 years earlier. you know?
Yeah.
And so therefore, when you create things, everything's not going to be a hit.
Sure.
But you got to make the best book you can, and you got to make an impression on somebody with the hope that that person you made an impression to remembers that character and wants to find a way to use them somewhere else down the line.
Well, and that's, I say that all the time about we are in a golden age in so many ways of pop culture entertainment, because the generation that is in charge now are the people who wanted certain animated series or certain comics or certain shows or movies that the technology at the time wasn't there. And the people in charge didn't get it or didn't care. So now those on that age come along, and I see people my age who are in charge and going, we're doing this show and we're bringing this character back. And, I don't know about but when people, we could say on the internet, maybe, nitpick or go, what was the worst superhero movie this year? I'm thinking, if you're talking about writing or whatever, that's fine. But if you're going to go, this excellent movie that 5 years, 10 years ago couldn't even be a possibility, and you're going to go, I'm thinking you're spoiled and you're not appreciating all that we have,
Well, the problem is there's just so much out there that you can take for granted. Right. It's a proliferation of material. It's a proliferation of albums. We have a joke in the house when you hear the name of a television show and they announce that they're in the 3rd, 4th, 5th season. I'm like, I never heard of these people, and yet they're in the 5th season. I mean, there's so much stuff out there in so many corners of the world right now. You're not even sure where to find it, let alone if you can find it. So that makes it hard. And I think because of that, everybody just gets, a little more. You were using nitpicky is probably a good way, and I have other words to use online.
Spoiled, that's a good one.
Spoiled is a good one. I used to use elitist a lot. They, because I use that word elitist primarily because of the huge problem that everybody's faced with is comparison to the past. That everything's available all the time, everywhere. And I used to talk that about DC Comics. Sure, people can sit and tear apart anything you're doing at any moment, but you're also comparing it to things. You also have a catalog of 50 years pre-existing material that you're comparing it to. So you're cherry picking what we're doing currently against the best of 50 years. Think about it. And so when you say that, it's like, okay, that's good. But realistically, I think we're doing on an average better than the years that preceded us. But that's not one of people. They're talking about individual moments or even pages of artwork. But the reality is on all these things is that because nothing goes out anymore. When you used to be doing comics in the 60s and 70s, there was no way to find the old stories. You had to go digging through back issue bins. There were no collections. There wasn't anything. It was just conversation. So therefore, the writers could repeat ideas and themes and stories without having to worry about it, comparing it, or people realizing that they're doing something that somebody did beforehand.
Right.
Very easy. Now I could pull out everything. Oh, that's like a book. And when people talk to you, they talk about events and comics that came out 50 years ago, like it came out yesterday. They remember them that well, and even when I look at this current phase of variant covers that are on comics today, the variant covers that sell the best are the ones that tie into nostalgic themes or recreation of old covers from 40 and 50 years ago. And ultimately, that's a shame.
Sure.
Going through what you said, it's great that you're able to revisit these things, but also what it's doing, it's stilting the growth of new concepts and ideas because we're so busy capitalizing on the past because it's a sure thing, a sure bet, instead of taking risks for the future, which ultimately could be the next big creation or the next idea that moves the creativity forward rather than just constantly wallowing in the same material.
And you've done that, and I always appreciated your thought process of going, no, and that's not an easy task, because if you jump too far ahead, the audience goes, no.
Yeah, exactly.
But if, it's hard to find, like, we're creating, everybody wants to have the next Bane or the next, Wolverine. Yeah. You can't plan it. It has to organically happen. And I always, or I was going to say, I admired you for that, but I also didn't envy you for having to try and, make it move and not go too far, but not go too slow.
Well, the patience is gone. The timelines and chances for things to be nurtured and grow collapsed unto itself. If you look again, go back to let's pick two Marvel characters, Punisher and Wolverine. Okay, so Punisher and Wolverine are guest stars for the most part. They guest star in Hulk. One guest star in Hulk becomes an X-Men. Well, and then Punisher's in a series of Spider-Man books for a while before he gets a chance for a showcase to show himself off. But they had a chance to build an audience and to build the character, to figure the character out before they launched him into his own series. So he had a chance to take an audience and move it in. A lot of times when you launch something brand new and fresh, nobody knows what it is. There's no pre-awareness to this. There's no comparables to what it might be about. So a lot of people are turned off by that idea, which is a shame, but we're constantly rushing characters. We introduce them and it became a story. You know what I mean? So everything moved very quickly. And even to the point that where characters, if Hawkman had a book and it didn't work and we canceled Hawkman, they used to wait like 5-6 years, before they tried to launch another Hawkman book.
Sure.
Now you'll have another one the next day. They'll cancel the book because the artificial #1 sales justified pushing it out, even though it's a self-fulfilling prophecy and the book winds up failing because it's being rushed to market again. And very little has changed to attract any interest from people who might have lost interest from the original series. So, the market gets tougher, the world moves quicker, and there's so much product out there. That unfortunately you have to rely on the pre-known things, but it does prevent new ideas from finding a place to exist.
I've gotten to a point, and I remember when it changed. I think one of my favorite times in comics was during the big, Infinite Crisis.
Yeah, that's everybody's favorite,
right?
Including my own.
I mean. And I think it was I heard it was yours too. Like every Blue Beetle dies, you don't expect
that was my story, yeah.
But it affected everything in such a natural way. You had the Thanagarian Rand War, that was that corner. You had this corner, and it was everything felt like it wasn't a gimmicky kind of event thing. It felt, no, this is a real event. And, things matter. And at the time, correct me if I'm wrong, Marvel was doing Civil War.
Same thing, yep.
Which was, I think, brilliant. You had Bendis on Avengers, and it was my Avengers because it was ground level. I'm a sucker for street level guys. And you had Blackest Night, and all of it mattered, and it was so good, and it affected every book. And it was the time when you went, you know what? Books I'm normally not going to read, I'm getting now because, zombie Green Lantern or whoever shows up in it.
Yeah.
And it was so perfect. And then Marvel, I remember thinking Marvel did a thing where they shook everything up.
Right.
Because I think this, everything gets put back in the box. Right. And if you're lucky, you creep out a little more and you expand that universe. You expand the character. Again, not an easy task to do. But Civil War wrecks everything. Spider-Man's on the run.
Right.
Now, everybody knows his identity. But the biggest thing that they did that I loved was they organically made it where, besides superheroes fighting supervillains, they had political differences, or so they team up, they run into each other to fight bad guy number 4.
Yeah.
But you have issues beforehand where they can fight each other. And I thought, this is great. This is not the same old, and it feels organic and natural and wonderful. And then for whatever reason, Marvel went change everything back to the way it was. And they adapted that, what I think they're doing now, which is every year we're scrapping it. Number 1 again. And I understand, and I've had people tell me, well, the idea of that is to trick new readers into a jump on point. And okay, that's and maybe that works. I don't know. But for the longtime reader or the guy who's getting the issues all the time, you're jerking us around to the point where I went, I can't. Daredevil is my Marvel guy.
Okay.
But everything else, I went, I'm done with Marvel. I'm not going to read them monthly anymore because they don't respect the reader.
Yeah.
You know, if you love this giant story and then at the end of the year it doesn't matter anymore, then why am I reading it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. For me, it was Spider-Man. Spider-Man and Hulk were my two characters, and the my jump off points. You always remember your jump off points.
Sure.
My jump off point for Spider-Man was I don't have a clear spot. I just got bored of the Clone War.
Okay, sure.
And, you know, and then later on, that Gwen Stacy. I came back a little bit when Dan Jurgens was doing it, and then I checked it out a little bit here and there, and then when they did the story with Gwen Stacy and Norman Osborn, I was out.
Yeah.
I was out, and but that's okay. That's a story for somebody else. I mean, it just wasn't my Spider-Man. That's the way I used to describe it. It's something, you know, it's just not my
Brand New Day was when for me, because Brand New Day, again, like you, I'm like, no, I love these characters. I'm going to read every title, and then Brand New Day comes along, and the writing goes back to the '60s style, the Marvel style, where you're hearing everything in his head and it's too simplistic. And I just kind of went, I feel bad spending my money on this. So
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of things you covered there. I mean, for me, you know, when I got in, we had a plan. What I used to do is I used to talk with the editors and the writers, and every year at the start of the year, I would build a master plan for the year of what we're going to do. Broad strokes, you know, and, you know, I'd say about 75, 80% of what you had in there winds up on the page, you know, but really broad strokes. And I would show that to Paul, and Paul say, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And then we're off to the races. And when you talk about that lead up to Infinite Crisis, you know, the plan was the idea, Infinite Crisis, well, the concept was infinite crisis, meaning all things were happening at the same time, every major problem. And you talk about political things, but I always used to use the expression greater good, so much that I actually put it in a book I'm writing right now as a character. But I use the expression greater good. What's your greater good? It's the superheroes. What's your greater good? Are you protecting the universe? Are you protecting the mystic realms? Are you protecting my neighbors? Are you protecting governments? What's your greater good? So when everything goes bad, where are you going to be when it all happens? You know, and that's what Infinite Crisis was. So we created these four. There was actually originally 5, but we created these 4 different competing concepts of where there's going to be problems for the heroes, and every hero started to split up and head to where the issue was the biggest for them, and it made it easiest for us because I wanted to show the connectivity of the world, but without doing major big stories. But if Superman sees an OMAC, and then Superman sees Batman, and then Batman sees Green Arrow, and Green Arrow is fighting the villains from Villains United. And if Green Arrow from the Villain United goes over and does a Green Lantern book, and he's in Rand Thanagar, and that means they're all in the same world. They're all connected. It's 6 degrees of separation. So that way you showed it's a shared world without everybody having to appear together. I never liked, and I still don't like, the shot where every hero is standing side by side, shoulder to shoulder. And they're all standing there, standing still, next to each other, unmoving. It's this one, it's like this, it's like they're setting up for a wedding photo.
Right.
And when I look at that shot, I said, everything about this is wrong. You get no personality, you get no dynamics, you get no interaction. These characters should not be standing next to each other. You know, Wolverine shouldn't be standing next to Punisher, or shouldn't be this, or Superman shouldn't be standing next to, you know, to Brainiac. You know what I'm saying? And they're all standing there like it's perfectly normal to be next to each other. And that drove me crazy because you lost the personality. And you know, I had a good fortune of working side by side with Jim Lee. And Jim used to talk to me all the time. And he used to tell me when he did X-Men, one of the things he did in X-Men is he made sure everybody was doing something different. One guy's eating, one guy's cigarette, one guy's sitting having a drink, the other one's standing, the other one's sitting, the other one's not interested, the other one's reading a book. Everybody was doing something different. They never sat and did the same thing together because people don't behave that way.
Right. And that's the other thing too, because if you're standing next to somebody in real life, you go, hey, how you doing? Well, a lot of these characters aren't going to get along or don't have anything in common. So the small talk that is in your head, whether you're thinking about it or not, Green Lantern and, whoever standing next to each other, or Green Arrow, who's very argumentative, isn't going to stand next to somebody without saying, I hate you, like that type of thing.
Exactly. Or they're gonna react differently to what's being said. How does 500 heroes all react in the same manner to something being said? You know what I mean? It's impossible. Because every character should have and why I say it's impossible is this. It's uniqueness. It's about what the characters are about. It makes it's not the character it's not because the character runs fast. It's because who the person is running fast that makes them interesting. That's the difference. It's where that focus is. And I used to argue and get into these discussions. I said, if these characters are going to look and act and behave in the same manner, why do we need 7 or 6 different versions of them? We only need one, because one represents that behaviors pattern. I don't want to put teams together where you don't have a dynamic and where there's conflict or conversation, because it makes the books less interesting. I was editing Titans for a short period of time. And
which run?
It was later on. It was in the 2000s. It was after Infinite Crisis, probably right around right before Final Crisis. Probably in 2007, 2008, around there, 2007. And when I took over the book, they had Static, Beast Boy, Kid Devil, and one other character, somebody else, one other one.
Deathstroke's daughter?
No, it wasn't Deathstroke. It was another young male jokester. You know what I mean? And I'm trying to think who it was. It was Kid
Devil and Marvin. I remember they put in there. That
was it. Yeah. It was Kid Devil, Static, Beast Boy, and there was one other guy. But the bottom line was they all were doing the same thing. They all were playing the same role. They were all quipping over each other. Do you know what I mean? And because of that, I'm like, you got to either find new personalities or get them all off of this book, because it makes no sense to have these characters all servicing the same role within the team. There's certain dynamics, and you hate to use the expression stereotype or caricatures, but when you start a team, you're building it on stereotypes and caricatures. You're establishing personalities and dynamics based upon very superficial behavior, just to understand how the team works if they're new characters. And then as the book develops, you start to develop the layers and the expression of who that character is, and they take on a life of their own, or don't, depending on how they're written. But you want to make sure that everybody fills a certain role, so nobody's playing that same thing. You don't need 3 or 4 characters being the matronly one. You don't need the silent brooding, 3 or 4 silent brooders. You don't need 3 or 4 strong men. You know what I mean? You don't need 3 or 4 comic releases. You know what I mean? You don't need 3 or 4 sex bots. You
have to believe that they're going to work as a team too.
Exactly.
And if everybody's cracking jokes, you're like, I can't take you guys seriously. Why would you go into battle with these guys?
Exactly. And that's the crazy part about it, is that it's about its construction. It's really understanding the roles. And you talked about Avengers beforehand and Grounded. You realize Avengers doesn't really start working until they get rid of all their best characters.
Yes. Yeah.
If you went to somebody and said, I have a team with Hulk, Iron Man, Thor, and Ant-Man and Captain America, and that team didn't work, but Captain America, Hawkeye, Quicksilver, and Scarlet Witch, that's going to be the successful team. People look at you crazy. But from the comic book professional side, the Captain America, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and Hawkman team's great, because guess what? 3 of those characters I can do anything I want with and not appearing anywhere else. So I can tell their story here and get into their personalities here and tell their dynamics here. And that makes it more interesting. They're not always running off to do something more important in their own book.
Right, right. Where they have to reference, I just came from.
Trust me, I know all about that one.
Right?
Well, they're off planet. I don't know. They just got back. Sorry. Just keep put the book in.
Well, I have to, you mentioned Jim Lee. And, like I said, when I buy the DVDs of the animated shows or series or movies, because those are excellent. But, you could watch them without buying them. But I always buy them, one, because I'm a completist and I want to have the stuff I love. But the backup conversations that you'd be in. You know what I mean? Like the little half hour, that's why I buy them, because if be like you, Frank Miller, Denny O'Neil, I can sit and listen to you guys talk about whoever, pick a character or just the medium of comics, and it inspires me. Like I get done listening to you guys and I go, all right, got to write the next thing that I'm working on, because
I always enjoyed doing those. Those are a lot of fun. I'm just going to tell one little funny story. So my funny story is, I was with Jim in a cab in Chicago. We were going somewhere. I forgot where we were. And we're talking, and he goes, you, the guy turns around, you, I know who you are. And of course, I'm thinking he's talking to Jim Lee. He goes, and he points to you. He goes, you're Dan DiDio. And I'm like, what? I'm like, how do you know me? Do I owe you money? And the guy goes, I know your voice anywhere. I've heard you on all those DVDs my whole life. He goes, I know your voice. And I'm like, oh, this is Jim Lee. He goes, I don't know who Jim Lee is, but I know who you are. And I'm like, it's the one time I got known better than Jim Lee. It's one time. That was my one win. And that's my story to tell. And I'm going to keep telling it.
Well, listen, I got a Jim Lee story.
Yeah.
Haven't gotten the pleasure to meet him yet, but my son is 14. And as a father, you like to do like the tiger and cub thing where you play around, gonna slap your face, blah, blah, blah. Well, he gets all rowdy and goes, all right, you ready? I'm ready. And I'm like, what are you doing? Oh, and I go, what is that? He goes, I'm Jim Lee. I go, are you going to attack me with a pencil? I think you got your lease.
I think you got your lease mixed up. Probably right about that. Yeah.
Right. So he goes, wait, who am I? I said, Bruce Lee. He goes, right. So ever since then, like, every time he goes, oh, I go, okay, Jim Lee, calm down. Go draw Batman. Go ahead.
Yeah. My kids never read comics either. That's okay. Don't worry.
Well, so and then to segue, which is really, this is where I thought we were going to start the conversation. Okay. But again, I knew we were going off on tangents. When I found out that you weren't at DC anymore, I was heartbroken because of all that you've done. And I thought, oh no, he's too good and loves comics too much.
What'd you wish for? Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen, but a lot of guys, after they're not with the company anymore, they might go away.
Yeah.
Neil Adams left and did like advertising stuff.
Right.
And I thought, and I was so happy to find out that you and Frank Miller are teaming up.
Cool things, I know, right?
I mean, it's so good because, we don't need to sell the audience on Frank Miller.
Right.
But you, as a greedy consumer, I want more.
Yeah.
I want,
it's funny. Frank and I basically, I developed a friendship with Frank, and we during the pandemic, I had worked with him on something just on a side on a side thing. And we just got started talking about comics, and we talked about the comics that we'd want to do. And I'm like, instead of complaining about it, why don't we just do it? And he goes, well, we could go to this company and that. And I said, no. I said, I'm not interested in going through anybody's company. I said, we're going to start something of our own. We're going to start something on our own. We're going to do it ourselves, top to bottom. I said, that intrigues me because that's something I haven't done. And I'm always to the point is that the last thing I want to do is repeat the same thing I've done before. And Frank's the same way. And so we went on this venture, and it's been a lot of work, but it's been extraordinarily rewarding. But we don't plan this to be this is not a competitor to any other company. This is more just something, getting a chance to tell stories we want to tell, and our own pace. And I tell the story a couple of times. I'll say it here. There was this moment that Frank and I were discussing things. I forgot what the topic was. And I stopped and I said, wait, are we allowed to do that? And it was a story beat. And he honestly said to me, stop me looking. He goes, who are you talking to? Like, who are you discussing that with? We're the only ones making our decisions. Everything's based upon what we believe is right or wrong in the creation. And that way you have that level of freedom not to be focused or driven into a particular place or a particular ideal. But reality is it allows me to really be able to focus on just telling the best story possible, and letting that story really take on a life of its own, and stand by what you do. Don't be afraid by it. I know a lot of people, unfortunately, that changed what they did and changed the stories they were telling because of pressure from other people. And I think that's a shame, because I think we got weaker product because of it. I'm extraordinarily happy and proud that we were able to do Identity Crisis before the level of pressure would be put on us not to do Identity Crisis.
Oh, really?
You know?
Yeah.
And I thought that was a brave story on Brad's part, but it was a braver story by the company putting it out, because they believed in the quality of the material and the quality of the storytelling. And at the end of the day, quality storytelling should win the day. We shouldn't be afraid to say things and do things. We should be able to stand by what we feel and believe. And it's great to work with Frank, because he's one of the real innovators in that market. He's always been very, forthright and really pushing the medium, because he believes in it and he loves comics and he wants to see it succeed and he wants to see it grow and achieve its full potential.
And he's another one that gets into the guts of why something works. Like, again, like I sit and I watch you guys talk.
We talk story. It's I could say it here because he's not here. It's a little humbling at times working with him. I mean, look, I had the great fortune of working with both. I've worked with Jeff Johns, I've worked with Jim Lee, I've worked with Frank Miller. But with Frank, it's something different. Just a master storyteller coming from a pool of knowledge that really is almost a forgotten art in a weird way. I mean, he's classically trained by people like Neil Adams and Will Eisner and all these people that he respected. He found a way to sit in with and learn from them and learn their craft and learn how they tell stories and how they turn a page. Right. And it's amazing to me because it's stuff that you take for granted that is so simple, but you don't realize how much thought goes behind it.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, like watching the behind the scenes stuff, I go, that's right. To go from that panel to that panel and the lighting and there's so much thought that, again, as a reader, you just go, yeah, I just take it for granted. But no, that had to come from his head.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And I've sat down with so many people over the years, but I remember with Walt Simonson, when Walt Simonson creates a page of art, he doesn't do it panel by panel. He designs the entire page to be the piece of art. So even though there's multiple panels in there, if you look at the whole page, there's a flow and construction that goes all the way through it that moves your eye through the story and just brings you into the events instead of doing these snapshots, of independent looks. And with Frank, he talks about less is more all the time, and about the use of negative space as a powerful tool to really draw your attention and eye to something that's singularly important in the material. So it's interesting to me to work with these guys and to learn, but it's been we're having a blast because we're kind of just doing it because we want to do it. There's no urgency. There's nothing pressing to do it. There's not really trying to achieve anything other than just do a comic that I'm proud of.
You know what I think the difference is with you guys as opposed to Joe Schmo, who thinks I'm a comic book writer artist.
Yeah.
I'm putting out my own issue. It's you guys in particular are your own worst critic. So like you second guess yourself to a healthy level.
Constantly.
Right? You're not going, no, I'm stubborn. I'm doing it this way. You go, no, wait, back up. You kind of beat yourself up.
Yeah. And it's Frank reviews my work, so I because I want him to, I'm intrigued, so I love it. But Frank reviews, and I turned in a script the other day, and I had Frank reviewing it, and he called me back with some notes, but the notes are subtle. The notes aren't, hey, we got to change this and that. The notes are subtle, and the scene is a woman is standing, just found out her husband died, and she's standing over his dead body, right? She's looking down at the dead body, and that's how I wrote the scene. And Frank comes back and he goes, "You got the scene wrong." And I said, "What is it?" And he goes, "Neil, have a Neil. The weight of the husband dying, and she wasn't there to help protect him and save him, took her to her knees." And I'm like, God damn, that's good. You know what I mean? And it's so subtle, and they won't even notice it when they read the comic, but they'll know it's more moving by reading the comic. You know what I'm saying?
It's a subconscious.
And It's a subconscious, and that's where you got to be attacking people. We're worried about splash and substance and just style all over the place. We talk about comics coloring and how just because there's a million choices of colors, you don't have to put them on every page. You should be more specific about what you do and more focused on what you're trying to say rather than trying to say everything all at once. And that's what I'm having fun doing with Frank. We're bringing things back to a style and sensibility that's not built to overwhelm, but entertain, and enjoy and be immersive in its own right. And I'm having fun doing that. I mean, it's been great. And Frank's also doing it from a very mentoring standpoint. He likes working with people. He likes working with talent. He likes teaching. He likes not just new people like an Emma Kubert, but existing talent like Philip Tan on Ronin. He's constantly teaching them. And when Frank worked with Andy Kubert on Dark Knight 3, Andy is a friend of mine. Andy pulled me aside and said, I learned more from Frank working on that book. And he's added new things to my art that'll now will be with me forever. Mm-hmm. And that's the impact at this point in a career. That's the better impact to really make that distinction and that impression on people that makes them want to be better. I think that's what a lot of what we're doing is all about. It's not, I can't wait to do a Spider-Man story. It's not what it's about. It's more about just really moving the art forward in a way.
That's you don't have like a set plan to do so many books at a time, right? Like you're just I feel like doing this
really. Okay, just how ridiculous we are. Okay, so he's doing Ronin and he wants to do Sin City, but he doesn't want to do everything the same way. He did Ronin with Philip Tan, and because he wanted to do it as a manga anime style book, and Philip has this beautiful anime style art that works perfectly for the book. That's why we're doing that book. He's doing a one shot. Frank's doing a one shot of Sin City with Mila Manera because he wanted to work with Mila Manera, and Mila Manera put his back against the wall and convinced him to do Sin City with him. So he's got a one shot there. And then Frank's going to revisit Sin City, but he's not doing it the same way. He's going to do a Western. It's going to be the origin of Sin City because he's been desperate to do a Western. So we're revisiting, but not revisiting. And for me, I'm telling a story with Ancient Enemies that honestly had its roots in an idea I had for an ultimate DC universe that I never executed. And I brought it to Ancient Enemies and I told it and brought new characters in. And I fell in love with them along the way, which is wonderful. But I'm also doing a one-shot special with Svengoolie, who's a on-air horror host.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So because he's friends of mine and I want to work with people I like, and that's why I'm doing it. And I told him, I said, if your company's doing a book, don't take it anywhere except to me because I want to work with you on this. And we're having a blast. So I'm doing stuff that I enjoy, and Frank has a couple of books, ideas that are in the hopper. I have a couple ideas in the hopper, and we'll get to them. But when you have a staff of 3 or 4 people,
right? Well, yeah.
You also have to be realistic, or else you miss phone calls and meetings that you were supposed to have the day before.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I have no idea.
Well, and you really do appreciate those people that are willing to work with you too, because thank God you're here because it's you and me, buddy.
Yeah. And we're doing this for us, and this is not about anything other than that. We're doing it because we enjoy doing what we're doing. This is, that's why we created this company. It's myself, Frank, and Selene Thomas, who's Frank's CEO for his company. The 3 of us together are Frank Miller Presents, and my wife is working with us because I only have 2 hands and I need her to handle everything else. She's been doing it.
I love the logo too with the hat.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to have something distinctive that spoke Frank. That we had something that was identical. We like the iconography. Frank and I talk about that all the time. Iconography. We love symbols to speak, because when the symbol says something, you don't need the full logo. And that comes from me, just from my DC days. When people put on a Superman shirt or a Batman shirt or even a Wonder Woman shirt, they were saying something about themselves. It was very much an identifier for who they are. And that's when you put a logo on, your logo should stand for something. And we hope sooner or later our work will define our logo, and then speak to the fans in a way that wants to wear them because they want to say the same thing we are. We're not sure what it is yet, but someday we'll get there.
But it's so funny you say that, because I have an addiction for t-shirts, say, or jackets, or something, because it says so much. And you're right. My son and I were talking about it, and he said the same thing. He doesn't want a picture of Batman on a t-shirt. He wants a certain logo.
Yeah.
Or something subtle from, like, say, I don't know, Gotham Police or something that doesn't come out and go, this is Batman or this is whoever. It's subtle because the people who know, or the people who don't are going to go, what's that about?
Well, yeah, and that was always key to me, because when wearing shirts, and I always say this, I would never wear a Superman logo or a Batman logo because everybody's wearing it. So it took on a different meaning because of that. And also, I used to remember when the Green Lantern logo was the secret handshake for comic fans. If you knew the Green Lantern logo, you must be a comic fan. Now, not so much. Everybody's seen it. So we have to go pretty deep into the well now to find that secret handshake comic book fan logo. But I got a couple of shirts that do that.
Well, if I wear the Greatest American Heroes t-shirt, people are like, oh, because they remember how great that was.
Oh yeah.
And it's not easy to find.
I used to have the E equals MC squared shirt from E-Man.
Yeah.
From those days. So I had them all. But yeah, that's fun. It's
Somebody wanted me to ask you, and I think you already answered it, but I wanted to make sure I did it. You mentioned about, like, the Marvel characters that you like. Was there anybody that you wished you got to write?
Here's the thing. Metalman was different for me because I had a story, but the reality is, there's characters that there's two different things. I enjoy my characters, so I don't have to write them. I enjoy what I read. You want to be perfectly honest. It's not like I read it and I have to now tell another story because of that. That never really pressed in me. My Metalman story is really basically, I wanted Metalman to get treated the same way every other character did, was to take all those incarnations and make an explanation that pulled it all together so that everything that Metalman did mattered. That was my logic behind my Metalman story. That's why I did that. And my logic behind Phantom Stranger was a character that I really wanted to write. I really wanted to write that. I loved working on that character. People got angry at me and said, you gave Phantom Stranger an origin. I said, yeah, to the fans, not to the world, to the comics. Nobody in the DC universe still knows who he is, but we now who know who he is. So now we can identify with him more and understand his motivations, while it might be a mystery to everybody else. You're in on the joke now. That makes you really part of the story. And
to see him without a hat, you're like, ooh.
Exactly. And that was the fun part. And I loved that character. So there's things that I see in characters that I want to tell stories with. But when I look at characters that I truly love, I probably truly love them because there were so many great stories with them, and that's probably why I don't want to do it. Like I said, that's how I feel about Superman. That's how I feel about Batman. That's how I feel about Spider-Man, Hulk. No story I want to tell because there's so many great stories that made me love those characters. So why would I want to tell another story? There's nothing I need to do there,
I mean, that's a cool perspective.
Yeah.
Because I think most of us are like, no, I love this character. So I want to play with that guy.
That's you have to have some hubris to be a writer. You have to believe you're going to make it better, or you're going to make something that nobody else has seen, or you have to make it feel like you're going to do something like that. But when you work on both sides of the fence, from the editorial side and then also the writer side, you realize there's a balance there, and a lot of things that you get really puffed up about as a writer aren't really that important when you're standing on the other side of the fence as an editor or an executive. It's like you're getting worked up about something that's really not that important. But okay, I understand it means a lot to you, but I'm not sure anybody else really cares, Well,
I remember early on, I'm 48 now, and as soon as I got out of college, I'm like, no, I'm going to be a writer. I want to write comics, and I would pitch either, and I don't know, you tell me if this was the right way of going about it. I have an original character, original stories.
Okay.
Or I'll gladly write some of your lesser known characters, because everybody wants to write Batman, Superman, whatever. I was like, give me anybody really. I was just so hungry to like
Yeah.
write something, and I thought original or somebody, the characters that you can't find a writer for, I'm there.
Yeah, what I used to ask everybody, because when people used to come to me writing samples and things like that, I used to say, give me any character that you can understand, that we have. That's the main one, because ultimately what I want to see is if you can capture the voice of the character that's already existing. You know what I mean? And you know how the character acts, walks, and behave. I always tell them the two faux pas, big faux pas, are to create a new character in that story and make the story about them and not the lead. Okay, which shows me that you're finding a crutch right from the start, which means you don't understand your lead. You want to write a Batman story? Give me a Batman story. Don't tell me about Batman's next door neighbor wondering if he's Batman or not. That's not the book I want. And the second thing I always tell them, the major faux pas, is don't come in telling me you're going to change the world, because we're not going to hire you.
Right, get over yourself.
And you got a lot of people going, my first story is everything you know about Batman is wrong, and we're going to reinvent his origin. And you get people like that, and you're like, we're going to tell you the story about his missing, and I'm like, what? First of all, I don't know who you are. I don't even know if you can write a page. And who are you to tell me you're going to change the pre-existing lore without first showing me whether you have any ability,
Right.
And you'd be surprised how many times that happens, because people are so busy trying to impress or trying to make the character their own that they ignore the fact that they're just renters. That's why my job was a rental.
Yeah. Denny
O'Neill
O'Neill was saying about how being you're the keeper of the flame for these characters.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We're there to take it from one point in time to another and then hand it off to someone else getting it done, and that was always something that you remember. So in doing so, the truth is, it's very hard to make an everlasting change on these characters. Incredibly difficult, primarily because they're either so clearly defined in people's minds that if it doesn't work with their interpretation, it doesn't stick. Has no stickiness. Sure. And everybody go, oh, that's why you say it all the time. Oh, they're just going to make it back to where they were before, because ultimately that's where everybody wants it to be at the end of the day. The characters you can change are the ones that are superficial in nature. And if you can add levels of depth without destroying or changing it so dramatically that the character is unrecognizable, then you've won. Best example of that possibly is Jeff Johns on Green Lantern. He took decades of material that is all over the place in the nicest terms possible, and found a way to contextualize it and put it together in a single form so it felt true to who the character was, did not destroy any stories that people might have held in high esteem or remembered, but found a way to put it all together in a nice package and then move the character forward. And that was a moment for me at DC when we did that, because at that moment, most people thought that Hal Jordan was a dead, broken character you couldn't do anything with. And here we found a way to reinvigorate him, which was fabulous, because that gave us the street cred inside the building and inside the company to say, okay, you fix that, what else you got? And then it just became this machine that we kept on attacking things to find better ways to tell the stories while being true to the core senses of who they were. And it worked for the first 5 years that I was there, for sure.
Yeah. Well, listen, I hope we get to do this again. I want to keep going, and you get it, because you get going on a roll.
Oh yeah. No, I get, you're gonna be started. I talk comics all day long. I can do it all day.
Me too.
Yeah.
Zoom is going to kick us off soon, so I'll bug you down the road. Maybe we could chat again.
That sounds good. Yeah, I mean, also just to let you know too, one of the things that I'm out there pushing too is come April, I'm going to have a prose novel coming out, superhero prose novel. Yeah. So that's good. It's called Hide or Seek. Basically, it deals with a young family, a young kid and his family who gets thrown into witness protection when his father, who's a superhero, is killed, and he's thrown into a town to protect himself with, again, the families of the people his father was fighting his entire life. So it's a lot of fun stuff happening there. So I'm excited by it. That's my yeah. For me, it's exciting. And more importantly, it's something that I never did before. And it's the first thing I did leaving DC was, once I finished the Metalman series, I moved in and I did a prose novel, which is something I've been challenging myself to do for a long time. And I had some help with it. A couple of guys that were able to really help me put it in order. And And I'm really happy with the book, and we'll see it come out in April. Hope people get it. It's a lot of fun.
Can't wait. Make sure, I'll make sure to repost it and all that.
That sounds great. I appreciate that. Great.
And I look forward to. I'm so thankful to get to do this with you.
I'm glad too. It's a pleasure speaking to you as well.
Thank you.
And thanks for having me on. It's a lot of fun, even if it's a day late.
Yeah. Hey, I'll take anything I can get. And tell Leilani, she's my new Facebook BFF.
Yes, she is. She's my rock. She's the one who always keeps me on track, and couldn't do without her. That's for sure.
I look forward to talking to you down the road.
Great. Thanks again. Good talking to you. Good talking to you now. Okay, bye now.
Bye.
The Never Gets Old podcast is part of the Forever Adventure Network and made possible by your donations through Patreon. If you'd like to help us out, please go to the Forever Adventure Network by Mac Jackson on Patreon and help by subscribing, rating, and reviewing wherever podcasts are heard. We also have a Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube channel. The show's music is by Harmony Constant and available wherever music is sold. Thanks for listening, everybody. And remember, stay excited.
The Forever Adventure Network. Welcome to the adventure.
Hi, this is Amara from the Always Podcast. I want to make sure you know about another awesome show, the MacGyver SG-1 audio series.
His eyes darted over to Jack's weapon. Sam, start taking all the gunpowder out of these bullets. He stunned Jack by taking the gun from his hands, and with one swift motion released the clip, discharging the bullets in the chamber before handing the empty gun back to the general.
It's written, edited, and performed by Mac Jackson of the MacGyver Podcast. He's bringing together the worlds of MacGyver and Stargate to bring us all new and ongoing adventures.
For some reason, something caused both Jack and MacGyver to glance up at the second-floor office window that hung over the large storage hangar. It was a shadow of a moving figure, a figure who now was staring down at them. Before they could say anything or move, the man ran over to the railing and opened fire on them. In that moment, they each knew they were about to be riddled with bullets.
Get into the epic story and hear how brothers Mac and Jack work together.
Suddenly, he spun on his heels to his brother. Jack, give me your phone. The general quickly took it from his pocket and handed it over. Yeah, it isn't working, you know. No, not as a phone. With that, MacGyver knelt down and smashed Jack's cell phone off the ground and cracked it open. As he pried it apart and reached for his knife, Jack stood stunned. That's my phone.
And how they disagree.
As he turned the engine off, he rechecked the inside of his pocket and pulled out his automatic handgun to check the chamber. As he verified the bullets loaded, he could see the disappointing glare of his brother in the seat next to him. What? This again? I don't like guns, Jack. Yeah, me neither. I like getting shot a lot less.
Subscribe and review today on Apple iTunes and like the Facebook page to keep up on all the latest episodes. I've been catching up on past episodes, and you don't want to miss it.